Welcome back, dear friends, to our sanctuary of the hidden and the profound. Tonight, we are turning a new page in our journey together. We are moving away from the galleries of painted canvas and marble statues to enter the quietest, most fragile corner of human history, the world of the lost book. There is a unique kind of magic in an ancient manuscript. Unlike a monument or a painting, a book is a direct conversation across time. When we look at the ink on a piece of vellum or papyrus, we are seeing the exact path a human hand took hundreds or even thousands of years ago. We are following their thoughts, their prayers, their fears, and their secrets. But history is often a cruel librarian. Fires, wars, and the simple decay of time have swallowed the vast majority of the world's written knowledge. The great library of Alexandria, the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, these were intellectual cathedrals that vanished, leaving us with only echoes of what they once contained. We often think of history as a solid road, but it is more like a vast ocean where only a few small islands of information remain above the surface. Yet, every so often, the earth gives something back. In the most unlikely of places, caves, desert sands, forgotten jars, and the walls of remote monasteries, manuscripts have survived against all odds. These are the lost libraries. They are the survivors of the great silences of history. They represent the victory of memory over oblivion. They are the artifacts of people who believed their words were important enough to hide, hoping that one day someone would find them and listen. Tonight, as you settle into a state of deep relaxation, I want you to imagine the smell of old parchment, that scent of vanilla, dust, and dried earth. Imagine the flickering light of a candle reflecting off a scrap of gold leaf. We are going to visit 5 secret places where the voices of the past were rediscovered, bringing with them knowledge that was thought to be lost forever. We will meet the accidental discoverers, the dedicated scholars, and the ghostly authors whose words were pulled from the brink of non-existence. Let us begin our meditation on the art of the hidden word. 1. The Dead Sea Scrolls, the shadow of the Qumran caves. Our first journey takes us to the lowest point on the surface of the earth, the shores of the Dead Sea. The year is 1947. The landscape is a harsh, sun-bleached desert of limestone cliffs and jagged, crumbling ravines. It is a place where the heat is heavy and the air is thick with salt, a place that feels as though time itself has been preserved in the heat. A young Bedouin shepherd named Mohammed Ed-Dib of the Tamira tribe is searching for a goat that has strayed from the flock. The sun is high, and the silence of the desert is absolute. To pass the time, and perhaps flush out the animal from the crevices, he tosses a stone into a small, dark opening in a high cliff face. Instead of the dull thud of rock on earth, he hears a sharp, crystalline crack, the unmistakable sound of shattering pottery. He climbs up, his hands gripping the hot, sharp limestone, squeezing his body through the narrow opening, and finds himself in a cool, dark chamber. Inside that cave, now known as Cave 1, are several tall, cylindrical clay jars. Expecting gold or jewels, he breaks open the lids with a pounding heart, but out pour only rolls of ancient, blackened leather wrapped in decaying linen. Disappointed, he brings them back to his camp. For weeks, they hang from a tent pole, nearly being used for fuel or leather scrap, before they are sold to an antiquities dealer in Bethlehem for a handful of coins. What Muhammad had stumbled upon was the most significant archaeological discovery of the 20th century. These were the first of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Over the next decade, 10 more caves would be found, yielding nearly 1,000 different manuscripts. This was the library of the Essenes, a separatist Jewish sect that had fled the corruption of Jerusalem to live a life of ritual purity in the desert. They lived in a community called Qumran, spending their days in ritual bathing and their nights in the scriptorium, copying texts by the light of oil lamps. When the Roman legions marched toward their settlement in 68 AD, the Essenes carefully packed their most sacred texts into jars and hid them in the cliffs, hoping to return when the storm of war had passed. They never did. Imagine the atmosphere of those caves. They are silent, bone dry, and untouched by the humidity that usually rots away organic matter. For 2,000 years, the scrolls sat in the dark, waiting. The art of these scrolls lies in the incredible calligraphy. We see the evolution of the Hebrew script, written with such precision that it looks almost printed. We see the work of scribes who believed that every stroke of the pen was a divine act. Among the scrolls are the oldest known copies of the Hebrew Bible, but the most fascinating are the sectarian texts. They contain the War Scroll, a terrifyingly detailed military manual for a final apocalyptic battle between the Sons of Light and the Sons of Darkness, complete with descriptions of trumpets and banners. They contain the Community Rule, which describes the strict monastic life of the desert dwellers, their shared meals, their silent prayers, and their rigid punishments for speaking out of turn. And then there is the famous Copper Scroll. Unlike the others, it is not made of skin, but of nearly pure copper. It is a treasure map, listing over 60 locations where gold and silver were supposedly buried. To this day, no one has found the treasure, but the scrolls themselves are the true wealth. They tell a story of a people who lived on the edge of the world, waiting for a cosmic change. As you imagine the dry heat of the Judean wilderness and the cool darkness of the caves, think of those jars. They were the original cloud storage of the ancient world, fragile clay vessels holding the weight of eternity. 2. The Nag Hammadi Library, The Secrets of the Gnostic Jar. We travel now to Upper Egypt, near the town of Nag Hammadi, under the shadow of the Jabal al-Tarif cliffs. The year is 1945, just as the Great War in the outside world is coming to an end. A local farmer named Muhammad Ali al-Saman is out with his brothers digging for sabak, the nitrate-rich soil used for fertilizer. The desert wind is blowing, kicking up dust as his spade strikes the earth. He hits a large, sealed earthenware jar, nearly 3 feet tall. Muhammad Ali is frozen with a prehistoric fear. He is a man of the desert, and in local folklore, ancient jars are often the prisons of jinns, malevolent spirits trapped by King Solomon or ancient magicians. He hesitates, wondering if he should run before the spirit escapes. But his brothers urge him on, whispering that it might contain kins, the buried gold of the pharaohs. He breaks the seal with his mattock, and instead of gold or a spirit, out pour 13 leather-bound papyrus codices. These were not the scrolls of the old world, but codices, the direct ancestors of our modern books. They featured individual pages sewn together and protected by stiff leather covers, some reinforced with scraps of older papyrus. Muhammad Ali brought them home and dumped them in the corner of his courtyard near the oven. His mother, unknowingly, used several of the precious pages to start the kitchen fire, the ancient ink flaring blue and green in the flames. It was only when a local priest saw them that the rescue mission began, leading to a decade-long journey through the black markets of Cairo and eventually to the Coptic Museum. These were the lost Gospels of the Gnostics. The Gnostics were early Christian mystics who believed that the physical world was a mistake, a prison created by a lesser, flawed deity called the Demiurge. They believed that humans contained a divine spark of the true, distant God, and that the goal of life was gnosis, or secret knowledge, to free that spark. When the early church began to standardize its teachings in the 4th century, these heretical books were ordered to be destroyed. A group of monks at the nearby Pachomian monastery, unwilling to see the wisdom burn, packed their library into a jar and buried it in the sand at the base of the mountain. The Nag Hammadi Library is a treasure trove of alternative history. It contains the Gospel of Thomas, which consists of 114 secret sayings of Jesus, many of which are poetic and strange, like, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you." It contains the Gospel of Philip, which speaks of a special, intimate relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, describing her as his companion. These texts describe a universe full of eons, divine beings, and a complex spiritual hierarchy. They speak of the Sophia, a feminine aspect of the divine who fell from grace and whose recovery is the key to universal salvation. Imagine the monk who buried that jar. He was acting in a moment of great danger, choosing the earth as a more reliable guardian than human institutions. For 1600 years, the Egyptian sun baked the sand above them, while the books remained cool and preserved. They represent the survival of a suppressed voice, a reminder that the hidden world is often just as vast and complex as the visible one. As you think of those leather covers, still supple after nearly 2,000 years, feel the weight of the secrets they were meant to keep. They are the echoes of a Christianity that could have been, a path of mystery and internal light. 3. The Diamond Sutra, the hidden room of Dunhuang. Our next stop is the edge of the Gobi Desert in northwestern China, at the Caves of the Thousand Buddhas in Dunhuang. This was once a vital crossroads on the Silk Road, a place where the smells of spices, camels, and incense mixed under the desert sun. In the year 1900, a self-appointed guardian of the caves, a Taoist monk named Wang Yuanlu, was cleaning a large temple when he noticed a strange crack in a frescoed wall. He was a simple man, dedicated to restoring the faded beauty of the caves. When he tapped the wall, he heard a hollow ring that suggested a void beyond. Intrigued, he returned at night with a candle and broke through the plaster. Behind the wall was a small, cramped room, about 9 feet square, stacked from floor to ceiling with tens of thousands of manuscripts, silk paintings, and printed scrolls. This was the library cave, or Cave 17. It had been sealed around the year 1000, possibly to protect it from an invading Karakhanid army, or perhaps as a ritual burial of sacred texts. For 900 years, the desert air had kept the silk and paper in a state of perfect preservation, frozen in time. Among the treasures was a scroll that changed the history of technology, the Diamond Sutra. Dated precisely to the 11th of May, 868, it is the world's oldest dated printed book. It predates the Gutenberg Bible by nearly 600 years. But it is not just a technical milestone, it is a masterpiece of woodblock art. The frontispiece is an incredibly intricate woodcut showing the Buddha sitting on a lotus throne, surrounded by his disciples and divine lions. The precision of the lines, the depth of the ink, and the balance of the composition are breathtaking. It was commissioned by a man named Wang Jie, who added a note at the end stating he made it for universal free distribution to honor his parents. But the library held even more secrets. Because Dunhuang was a global hub, the cave contained manuscripts in languages that were thought to be extinct: Sogdian, Khotanese, and Tocharian. There were Christian prayers written in Chinese, Hebrew documents from Jewish merchants traveling the trade routes, and even a manual for a game of chess. There were also secular treasures, tax returns, contracts for the sale of slaves, and even a child's handwriting exercise that looks remarkably like a modern homework assignment. It was a snapshot of a globalized world that existed long before our own, a world where ideas flowed as freely as the silk. Wang Yuanlu, overwhelmed by the find, tried to interest local officials, but they ignored him, telling him to seal the cave back up. Eventually, Western explorers like Aurel Stein and Paul Pelliot arrived. They spent nights in the cave, hand-picking the finest manuscripts and silk paintings to send back to museums in London and Paris. The library cave of Dunhuang shows us that art and knowledge have no borders. It was a place where the civilizations of East and West met and whispered to each other in the dark. As you imagine the vast, silent desert outside and the mountain of knowledge inside that small room, think of the 900 years of silence that protected those words. It is a monument to the endurance of paper and the persistence of thought. 4. The Oxyrhynchus papyri, the mummies of the trash heap. Sometimes the most secret place of all is the one everyone ignores. At the end of the 19th century, two Oxford scholars named Bernard Grenfell and Arthur Hunt traveled to the ancient Egyptian city of Oxyrhynchus. They weren't looking for gold-leafed tombs or grand palaces. They were looking for the city's ancient rubbish mounds. They were young, ambitious, and possessed a strange theory. They knew that in the rainless climate of Middle Egypt, even trash could become a time capsule. What they found was a library of the everyday. Over hundreds of years, the inhabitants of Oxyrhynchus had thrown away their unwanted paperwork. As the city expanded, they simply piled their trash in mounds outside the walls. The sand eventually covered these mounds, and because it never rains, the papyrus never rotted. Grenfell and Hunt hired hundreds of local workers to dig through these mounds, sifted through layers of dust and ancient organic waste. What they found was not a deliberate library, but a random, chaotic archive of a lost civilization. It was history in its rawest form. The art here is found in the fragments of lost genius. Because the people of Oxyrhynchus were highly literate and loved the classics, they threw away old, worn-out copies of books we thought were lost forever. Among the receipts, tax returns, and private letters were the lost poems of Sappho, the 10th muse, whose words had been silent for centuries. There were lost plays by Sophocles and Euripides, and even fragments of lost gospels that offered a different glimpse into early faith. They found a fragment of a poem by Archilochus and the Hellenica Oxyrhynchia, a massive history of Greece that filled a major gap in our knowledge of the 4th century BC. But the most human parts are the personal letters. We see a boy named Theon writing a complaining letter to his father, scolding him for not taking him to the city for a festival, saying, "If you don't take me, I won't eat, I won't drink, so there." We see a dinner invitation from a woman named Herice for her daughter's wedding, and a contract for a wrestling match that was clearly fixed by the promoters to ensure a specific winner. We see the medical prescriptions for hangovers and eye infections. These are the books that people actually read, the paperbacks of the ancient world. The Oxyrhynchus papyri remind us that history is not just made of grand monuments, but of the scraps of daily life. Each fragment is a puzzle piece. Scribes and scholars today spend their entire lives under microscopes in Oxford, trying to match the jagged edges of a poem that hasn't been heard in 2,000 years. It is a slow, quiet art of reconstruction, a digital archaeology that brings the dead back to life, one word at a time. Imagine the scholars in their sun helmets, sifting through the dust of an ancient city, finding the lost words of a poet in a pile of 2,000-year-old trash. It is a reminder that nothing is truly lost as long as the earth remembers our discarded thoughts. 5. The Archimedes palimpsest, the ghostly lair. Our final stop is not a place, but a book itself, a manuscript that hid its secrets in plain sight. In the year 1229, in a monastery in Jerusalem, a monk named Johannes Myronus needed parchment for a new prayer book. Parchment, made from specially treated animal skins, was incredibly expensive and labor-intensive to produce. To save money, he took an older, useless book from the library, scraped off the original text with a pumice stone, washed the pages, turned them 90 degrees, and wrote his prayers and hymns over the top. This is called a palimpsest, a word that means scraped again. For centuries, this book, the Archimedes palimpsest, sat in the library of the monastery of Mar Saba near the Dead Sea. To any monk who held it, it was just a prayer book, a collection of religious devotion. But underneath the hymns were the ghostly, faint outlines of a much older text, a shadow of Greek letters peeking through the black medieval ink. It wasn't until the 20th century that scholars realized what was truly hidden there. In the late 1990s, a private collector bought the book at auction for $2 million and allowed scientists at the Walters Art Museum to use multispectral imaging, essentially a high-powered digital X-ray for books. The results were staggering and sent shockwaves through the scientific world. By using different wavelengths of light, they were able to make the top layer of medieval ink disappear and the bottom layer of 10th century Greek text glow on the screen. Beneath the prayers was the only surviving copy of several works by the Greek genius Archimedes. It contained his Method of Mechanical Theorems, where he described the use of infinity and anticipated the foundations of modern calculus 2,000 years before Isaac Newton and Leibniz. He was doing advanced mathematics while the rest of the world was barely counting. It also contained a lost speech by the Athenian orator Hyperides and a commentary on Aristotle. The Archimedes palimpsest is a work of ghostly art. It is a bridge between the medieval religious world and the ancient scientific world. The two texts sit on top of each other, a physical manifestation of how history layers itself. One man's prayer is literally written on another man's science. We see the scrape marks of the monk, the faint traces of the Greek diagrams of spheres and cylinders, and the beautiful, decorative calligraphy of the prayer book all at once. As you imagine the blue and ultraviolet lights revealing the hidden Greek letters beneath the medieval script, think of the resilience of knowledge. It can be scraped away, written over, submerged in water, and forgotten for 1,000 years. Yet it still waits for the right light to show its face again. It is a reminder that even when we think a story is finished, there is often another one hidden just beneath the surface, waiting for us to learn how to see it. It is a testament to the fact that the human mind is capable of leaps of genius that can survive even when the paper they are written on is recycled. And so, dear friends, we close our books for the night. We have traveled from the desert caves of Qumran to the trash heaps of Egypt and the hidden rooms of the Silk Road. We have seen that the lost libraries are not just collections of words. They are the survivors of our shared human journey. These manuscripts tell us that our history is fragile, but it is also incredibly stubborn. Knowledge has a way of finding a dark corner to hide in, waiting for a shepherd, a farmer, or a curious monk to stumble upon it. These discoveries remind us that we don't know everything yet. The earth is still a vast archive, a silent library with many rooms still locked. There are still jars in the sand, rooms behind frescoes, and secrets hidden beneath the ink of old prayers. Every time we find a lost page, we reclaim a piece of our own identity. We realize that the people of the past were just as vibrant, just as confused, and just as brilliant as we are today. As you drift off to sleep tonight, imagine yourself in one of those quiet, dusty places. Feel the stillness of the caves and the warmth of the desert sand. Think of the millions of words that are still out there, tucked away in the shadows, waiting for the light to hit them. You are part of a species that loves to tell stories, a species that refuses to let its voice be silenced by time. You are a reader of the world, and the world still has many stories left to tell. May your dreams be filled with the scent of old parchment and the light of ancient wisdom. May you find peace in the knowledge that even when we are gone, our words, our art, can still find a way to reach the future. There is a continuity to our thoughts that stretches back to the first scribe and forward to the last reader. Sleep well, dear friends, and find comfort in the enduring power of the hidden word. Good night.